Haikyuu, Ping Pong, March Comes in Like a Lion, Chihayafuru, Sound Euphonium. In some ways, these are basically all the same show. A character or group of characters, usually as part of some kind of school club, enters competitions for an activity like a sport or music, and gradually learns to improve their skills, as well as discover and build their passion for it. This is the classic competition show. Unfortunately, I do think that a common roadblock keeping a lot of people from watching competition shows is people saying something like, oh, well, I don't know anything about volleyball, or music, or whatever this shit is. But I really do think that competition shows can be for anyone. So if that sounds like you, here's my argument for why you're fucking stupid. So I'm gonna give 3 examples from shows from my personal experience, each of them being about a different type of competition. We've got Haikyuu for sports anime, Sound Euphonium for music anime, and Chihayafuru to represent the shit you've never heard of category. Probably the hardest one to get people into. And we'll start with that one. We'll start with the thing that I had no clue even existed, competitive karuta, the subject of the anime Chihayafuru. This is a game that I literally can't even play because I can't even read the cards, but I've still somehow developed an appreciation for it, and for how absurdly hard it looks. Now I'm going to challenge myself to explain karuta in 30 seconds. Ready? And go. Okay, so there's this Japanese poem anthology that has 100 poems in it. In karuta, you play a 1v1 match with a deck of 100 cards that each contain a line from one of these poems. 50 of those cards are actually used and are placed on the playing field and are flipped face down for the start of the game. Then in each round, a reader reads out one of the 100 poems at random, and whichever player touches the corresponding card first wins the round. So that means you have to memorize all 100 poems and the exact location of all 50 cards so you can get the right one every time. And half the cards aren't even on the field, so you also need to remember those too so you don't make a false move. And there's a few seconds left, so don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more. If you're trying to get someone into a show like Chihayafuru, that is exactly how you're not supposed to do it. In reality, it's really not that complicated. Basically, you've got a whole bunch of cards on the field. The players memorize where they are, and then they get flipped over, and each round someone reads out a card, and the players race to see who can touch it first. That's basically it. And the show thankfully does a pretty good job at explaining this basic idea at the start. So after you get that, then you get to appreciate the layers of how difficult and complex the game can be, and how much time, dedication, and talent you need to be good at it. Because these players are fucking fast, like superhuman levels of fast. One detail that blew my mind is when they talked about how a lot of the poems on the cards start with the same syllables. So normally it'd be impossible to tell which card you're supposed to go for when the reader starts reading, but to get an advantage, some players study the little tiny, subtle tonal differences in the specific reader's voice so that they can tell exactly which card it is just based on the first syllable alone, just for the sake of reacting like 0.1 seconds faster than their opponent. And this is the kind of stuff that helped me stay engaged and helped me understand how much love and passion the players had for the game, not just in the anime, but in the real world too. So that was my experience getting into a thing that I'd never heard of before, which was really cool. But on the other side of things, volleyball was something I at least understood on a very basic level going in. You got 2 teams, a net, a ball, bump, set, spike, and get hit in the face. Of course, I only played in school, I was complete dog shit, and I never really cared about it much. I preferred other sports, or even better, not exercising. But by the end of just the first season of Haikyuu, I'd gone from this to this.
And the center, they orchestrate the offense of the team. They must be highly skilled.
So why did I physically transform into a Pro ZD skit after watching a show about a tiny orange child jumping really high and slapping a ball around? Once again, this show appealed to the general human experience. What changed was the medium through which the characters experienced their passion. And then finally we get to the main course. The most recent competition anime I watched and fell in love with is Sound Euphonium, which is also pretty much going to be the focus of the rest of the video. Now, to repeat myself again, I was never really much of a volleyball player, and I've obviously never played karuta, but there is one thing I can relate to, and that's being in my fucking high school band, baby! I've hammered home the idea that you absolutely do not need to be an expert in the thing that the show is about in order to fully enjoy and love it. You don't need experience. But God, does it feel good when you have experience. Series like this tend to be written by people who've also had their own experience in the subject matter. So in Euphonium, for example, there's lots of tiny little details that wouldn't really matter much to a regular viewer, but to a band kid, it's like bonus DLC content that enhances your connection to the show. There's this one clip where the band's doing a warm-up before their rehearsal, and I couldn't help but notice this one kid who just kept playing for like a second too long after everyone else stopped. And I was like, that is the most specific but completely accurate thing I've ever seen. It's such a tiny detail that you really don't need to include at all, but it's stuff like this that sticks in my mind and helps make the show special. My overall point is you can obviously experience any one of these types of shows regardless of how familiar you are with the subject. If you're new, you get to learn a lot of interesting stuff and explore a world that was previously unknown to you. If you're experienced, you get to enjoy the little details that make it clear that this writing is coming from the author's personal experience. And because that's something you share, you get a deeper connection to the show through a nostalgic understanding. The main character of Sound Euphonium, Kumiko, is someone who's pretty different from most other protagonists in these kinds of shows. At the start, she's someone who isn't really outwardly passionate about anything, really. Other competition shows like Haikyuu and Chihayafuru both have gung-ho protagonists who are totally absorbed in their respective activities from day one. But I like this approach here because it helps make her more relatable and real. It's more likely that whatever your hobby is, you consider yourself just okay at it. There's some parts you like and some others that you don't like, but it's just kind of a fun thing to do, not the main purpose of your life, which is totally fine. Kumiko's story starts with her middle school band having failed to qualify in their regional competition, and she doesn't really mind. Their band was pretty good, but she never really thought they had much of a chance at advancing in the first place. It just wasn't that big a deal. This is just a club after all. That is, until the relatively ordinary band member sees how her fellow bandmate feels about the loss. And her curiosity for how someone could feel this strongly about something evolves. Given the right environment and enough time, Kumiko gradually becomes someone who does care. And it's not just her. A lot of the other band members go through a similar shift over the course of the show. Watching characters learn to love what they do is definitely one of the biggest reasons why I love these shows so much. But you can't get that without watching them struggle first. During the second season of Sound Euphonium, a question started getting asked around. It was a really simple question, but it really stuck with me for some reason. One character says that they don't like competitions. They're brutal, they're unfair. You can work your ass off and get nothing in return. Without a doubt, not everyone is born a natural competitor. At the start of the show, the band conductor asks the band to vote on what their goal is for the year. They could just take it easy and chill out playing music casually, but if they wanted to try to make it to nationals, that meant constant practice. That meant nitpicking minor parts of pieces that sound just a little bit off and playing them over and over hundreds of times. That meant not everyone would even make it into the competition team, and that people would be weeded out through auditions, which would be stressful and nerve-wracking on their own. In the case of music competitions, there's even an extra level of unfairness, because there's no opponent. There's only a subjective group of judges to make a call as to if your band deserves to move on or not. And if you don't make it, all you can really do is improve for next time. Competing is extremely tough and grueling, and there's tons of times where giving up would be a pretty reasonable thing to do. But that's the nature of competitions. That's just how it is. Because if you don't go through that process, someone else will. By watching this show, we're following everything this band does and seeing how hard they're working, and maybe we'd naturally expect them to come out on top. But this isn't a shonen anime. Our band works super hard, but maybe another one worked even harder. Not everyone will make it through. But at the same time, that makes the ones who do get through all the more special. Back to the original question, we also have the other side of things. If you don't like competitions, then it's probably because you fucking suck. You're the loser. Get good. Probably my favorite part of any competition show is the payoff, when they actually get to the competitions, after you've watched them go through these long arcs of preparation, practice, struggling, losing, and starting all over again. Sound Euphonium does something truly above and beyond, because during the competitions, they show the band's full performance, uninterrupted, from start to finish for the very first time. If you're paying attention, you get to hear the individual characters play the improved versions of those same sections that they were struggling with before, several episodes prior.
はい、そこまで。大前さん、そこ難しいですか？
大前さん？はい。結構苦戦してましたからね。
Seeing and hearing everything come together is such an indescribably satisfying feeling, because you get to feel so proud of these characters that you've been watching this whole time. Not to mention the animation the entire time is just going fucking nuts and is an absolute pleasure to witness. Seeing the band improve over time actually got me thinking that this show actually stopped being relatable to me at some point. And that's because my band fucking sucked. Not that many of us were very passionate, and almost nobody practiced. Ultimately, concert band isn't where my personal passion lies, but watching this show still made me think back to those times, because I still really enjoyed them, and I think back to them fondly. And I think I do regret not cherishing those times more. I wish I'd tried a bit harder. And it's thanks to Sound Euphonium that I get to feel that way. To end this video off, I want to talk about motivations. They're complex and multifaceted. People can be motivated by all kinds of things. They play for the sake of their friends, their family, to prove a point, to become the best. But I think my favorite one is also the simplest one. Loving the thing that you do. Loving the sport. Loving the instrument. Loving the game. You do it because you enjoy doing it. And in the end, what other reason do you really need?